And we are live.
The Fantasmagorium show presents Guns, Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns. Today, we start the countdown, continue the countdown, assess the countdown to No Time to Die. I am Scotty, and my opposite number is Kat. Hey, Kat, how are you doing?
Great.
And we have Steve in Q Branch with the news. What's going on, man?
Not much. Getting ready for the show. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to a lively discussion about Thunderball tonight from the two of you.
Impressions right off the hop, Kat. What did you think of Thunderball this time around?
It gets a little bit better with each viewing, but there's still,
It
things.
does, doesn't it? Yeah, oh no, there's definitely things, but I was pleasantly surprised. But before we get into that, today is a very special day in film history, in James Bond history, in the history of Scotland. Steve, what day is today?
Sean Connery's birthday.
It is. It is. He would have been older today. Unfortunately, a little bit.
At least 1 year older.
At least 1 year older. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. He passed away last year on October 31st, but he was born on the 25th of August, 1930. Kat, what are your impressions of Sean Connery?
I still think he was the best Bond. He had a lot of other great movies, too. And yes, as I understand it, he was obsessed with golf and Scottish independence.
Mm-hmm.
But didn't want to live in Scotland that much, as I later learned.
Allegedly, it has something to do with taxes. I'm not sure. He did pass away in the Bahamas, in Nassau, appropriately enough, considering we're talking about Thunderball today. And yeah, I'm happy. I would say Hunt for Red October is probably my second favorite role, then Henry Jones Sr.
My second favorite role would probably also be, or my second favorite role would be Henry Jones Sr. My third favorite role would be from The Man Who Would Be King.
Ooh, nice one. Oh, I haven't seen that in a while. But it is a fantastic movie. So happy birthday to Sean Connery, our featured Bond of, ever. Second favorite for me, but still, happy birthday, Sean. Steve, what is going on news-wise in terms of looking down the barrel of No Time to Die?
Well, MI6 HQ offers a box office projection. How much money can No Time to Die take at the global box office under current conditions?
Well, with MGM confirming to exhibitors at CinemaCon that No Time to Die will be released in cinemas around the world in just over a month's time, come what may, despite U.S. confidence in cinema plummeting to just 66%, the latest reporting suggests that box office forecasts have been recalibrated. Mm-hmm. All right. According to a person with knowledge of business practices at Eon, Vulture reports that everyone's expectations there have been adjusted downward. They've lost so much money by moving No Time to Die. The marketing has gone stale, that person says. The Broccolis care more about the UK than anything, making a big hit in the UK and a decent hit in the US and the rest of the world. With pockets of Europe, Latin America, and now Australia getting hit with the Delta variant, instead of doing 100 million, a movie now does 50 or 60, a studio executive told Vulture. If the business is off by 30%, that kills us. But Bond feels ready to go. MGM is a one-movie company. I don't think they can hold it another 6 months. Eon is hoping for the $700 million to $800 million range. There's no way they're going to get there, but there may be some cover. We're probably going to do a huge number. We can blame COVID, do some business in the U.S., and move on. Kat, how do you feel about that assessment?
Reasonably accurate. I believe the numbers they came down to for being realistic was 480 million and optimistically 530, which it could do that. I mean, the Fast movie made 650 or something like that.
Something close to that, yeah.
Right, and these movies, of course, Bond movies are so much more popular overseas than that is. So yeah, I think it could hit into the 500 range potentially. And if the movie is as good as everybody thinks it is, maybe it'll drive just more people out there who otherwise weren't planning to see it.
Well, and have you heard anything early release-wise, early reactions, aside from the next story that we'll get to in a second? But have you heard anything about early reviews?
Well, I remember as early as June 2020, there was an article, I believe it was with Forbes, might have been Total Film, where Cary Fukunaga was being interviewed by a journalist. And he was showing him clips from the movie, and they're going over. There's certain things he obviously couldn't divulge because of NDAs and things that the journalists couldn't divulge. But he was like super impressed with it. He's like, man, I'm not really into Bond movies, but this is like something else. The reaction to everybody at CinemaCon, which we'll get to in a minute. And then even Barbara opined that, take it with a grain of salt because she's the producer, but she says if Cubby was alive, he would probably think it was the best one since On Her Majesty's, which was actually, Cubby really liked that, even though the fans and the critics at the time did not. So that could be saying something for it. And given what Carrie has already done, people have already had pretty positive reviews for gearing in that direction. So I'd be very surprised if it ends up being like a really bad movie.
Am I just so accustomed to having my hopes low that I don't want to hear that it's good? I want to find out for myself.
Maybe.
All right.
I mean, I don't know, but maybe. I don't know. I think it'll do good business here, actually. I don't know what numbers they're looking for exactly. They didn't say in the article for the U.S. box office or the North American box office, but I think it'll do. I think it'll do good numbers here. There's definitely an excitement for the movie. Now, I don't know. I don't think it's going to do $100 or $1 billion or anything, but I do think it's going to do well here. I think people are looking forward to it. As long as it doesn't move again, I think we're good. I think they'll get the numbers they're looking for here. Obviously, in the UK and Europe, it'll do better, as these films usually do. But that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I think the North American projection was 179 million.
Oh wow!
Over the run, right?
Yeah, over the run, not the
yeah. So I think that is a very doable number.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Next up is MGM has shown a preview of No Time to Die at CinemaCon.
And this is also coming from MI6HQ, the annual CinemaCon event held in Las Vegas this week. And it was MGM's turn to today, I believe.
It was actually yesterday.
It was yesterday to showcase their slate of upcoming films to the exhibition industry, cinema owners to be specific, and give them sneak previews for forthcoming attractions. After showing clips of other MGM movies, the presentation wrapped with a 9-minute clip from the pre-title sequence, and MGM reiterated that No Time to Die would be released in cinemas in the USA on October 8th. We know it's been a long wait, DeLuca said. Trust us, we felt it too, but the wait is nearly over. Obviously, we're beyond thrilled to be joining with our friends and producers Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli, and our incredible director, Cary Fukunaga, all of whom value and worship the theatrical experience with everybody in this room. We are bringing Daniel Craig's final performance of James Bond to theaters this fall, and we can't wait for audiences to see the remarkable way he's closing out his legacy with this film. This man leaves it all on the field. It's going to blow your mind. That sounds really... And also, the reason I bring up MI6HQ is that if you'd like to read a full description with spoilers of what they purport to be the pre-title sequence, you can check that out over there. It was a highlightable text for me, and I didn't want to bring that all over in your face if you didn't want it. So the only point of contention is the allegation that it's going to be a pre-title sequence. Kat?
No. That article I was talking about earlier from June 2020, Cary was showing this guy, the journalist, a scene from the movie, and he stops it halfway through, and he's like, you know what? This scene doesn't make any sense unless you have context. And Cary turns to his editor, and he says, can we show him the pre-title sequence, like the whole thing? And he's like, yeah, okay. So they pulled it up, and they started playing it, and they described what it was, and it was not this. From the sounds of the footage, yes, everybody thinks this Italy thing is probably going to be the beginning of, like, Bond's entrance into the movie, if you will. But I don't think it's a pre-title sequence. All right, I have a good reason to believe it is not.
It seems quite long for a pre-title sequence. Am I wrong?
Right, because that's only in the way. No spoilers, but I did read the description, and it's only like part of the scene. It's like a 9-minute chunk, right. So that would be even longer. So it's not. Yeah, it's not the pre-title scene.
From what I gathered, when John Campea and Aaron Cummings went live and talked about this yesterday. They loved what they saw, for one, but they didn't have any indication that there was some kind of pre-title sequence. It sounded like they just got a chunk of the movie.
Right. Writers, I think that a lot of people are just assuming based on the content of the scene that, it sounds like this is Bond's introduction to the movie, ergo it must be the pre-title sequence. Right. And in fact, there are 3 or 4 other films where Bond is not even in the pre-title sequence in this franchise. So that wouldn't be like like From Russia with Love, for instance, which we already reviewed. He wasn't in the pre-title sequence of that either.
Right.
So it's not unprecedented. But I do like the encouragement that I think the big takeaway here is the fact that they were so confident in presenting this and committing to October. It kind of solidifies what we were talking about last week and how they're kind of out of marketing money, which is a bit, unfortunate. But because of course we all want the movie to succeed, even though that's likely. I think it will succeed by pandemic standards. And frankly, while we don't know what's going to go on with the FTC and the Amazon acquisition, I don't see why they wouldn't approve it, given that this is not a studio in the same vein that Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Fox were when Disney bought all that. So, I think the future of the franchise as a whole will be fine. Like, let's say hypothetically that, the FTC nixes the deal, and MGM can't afford to make any of the Bond movies because this flops. Well, then they just sell their interest in the franchise to another studio, which would be more than capable of doing it.
Right.
So it's not like it's doomed or the whole future of Bond is doomed or anything like that. That was my takeaway. It sounds like it's definitely coming October 8th for us.
Okay. Yeah, well, I can't wait, and it's nice to have some reassuring news. And with the footage that was screened at CinemaCon, I can now confirm it's not just a trailer. They did not just make a trailer. There's more stuff that has not been seen. So I have hope, and that's what that feeling is. It's hope. What do you think, Kat? Would you like to find some James Bond women and put them in order and of skill and objectification?
Sure.
Before we do that, I would like to, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to plug my book. I brought along a trailer to the show today, so if you'll, like I said, if you'll indulge me, I'd love to play the trailer for you. Great. Thank you very much. So if you'd like to get a copy either digitally or on paperback, the link is in the description of this video. I can duck out, and then I'd like to come back and give you my top 5.
Sure.
If that's okay. Cool. All right. I'm going to duck out, and I'll let you guys do your thing. Have a great one.
See you in a bit, man.
All right. Another person I forgot to mention that I heard reactions from was last fall when MGM was considering selling the movie to streamers. They did screen it for some of them, and a few quotes did come out saying that they think it would be well worth the wait that they didn't end up selling, even though they very much would have liked to have bought it.
Okay. Well,
now,
I am looking forward. All right. So how today, based on the thumbnail, let's get to the nitty gritty. How have we decided whether, like, what is a Bond woman? I specifically chose the title Bond woman because I did not want it to be a Bond girl, because you and I were both sort of bouncing back and forth as to whether or not it was going to be the ones that survive to the end, or if it was just going to be the lady characters of James Bond on the whole, right?
Right.
So we've got some villains, we've got some survivors, we've got some sidekicks. You know what? Is Moneypenny on your list?
I didn't put her on the list. I probably should have, because there were I also I should have, because I kind of put my criteria as, is it somebody who Bond is, also flirtatious with or tries to sleep with, or like, for example, I didn't put people like Rosa Klebb or Irma Bunt on the list because they're more of henchmen and Bond never tries to do anything with it. So, yeah. And I did skip a lot of them when this is kind of a very interesting discovery for me. As I was going through it, I found that I kind of disliked a lot more of them than I thought I would like.
Well, it's kind of, I don't know. I think it's sort of a situation of, it's like when we get to rank our lighters. It's like, we're going to name 2 and then it's going to be like, and the rest. And so starting at the bottom of the list, your least favorites, because I think I've got my top 10 are in order.
Okay. So least favorites were the ones I didn't mention.
Okay. Like, so are we talking like Bambi and Thumper? Are we talking Plenty O'Toole? Did
like
Plenty O'Toole make your list?
Like no, I forgot about her. Like the lead from Living Daylights, Honey Rider, Tatiana Romanova from From Russia with Love, and I can't even remember her name. The second, the girl who pretends to be Bond's wife and You Only Live Twice. Yes. And then both of the girls or both of the women in The Man with the Golden Gun. And then there were a few other, not Pam Bouvier, but the other one from License to Kill. And then Stacey Sutton, Lupe, to a Kill, didn't like her either.
No.
Or Christmas Jones from The World Is Not Enough, or Jinx from Die Another Day. Like, those people didn't make the list because it comes to a point where it's like splitting hairs trying to decide what is worse or who is worse at that point. And so it's like, I didn't even bother ranking those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're on the same page. Like, I have a couple that are written down that, like, I have a soft spot for Corinne Dufour, who was the lady who gets killed by the dogs in Moonraker. Like, I actually
thought about putting her on the list, and I thought, should I? And then I didn't get around to it, but I probably should have.
Yeah, no, and fair enough. Like, is Christmas Jones on your keepers or dropped?
And I kind of dropped. She didn't really do anything for me.
And again, it being a Bond woman, she kind of did something for me. So she's on the list for, like, I wrote her down. She's certainly not in the top 10, but she's there. And I appreciate that you didn't like Stacey Sutton, because I did pick A View to a Kill woman. I picked Paula Ivanova, the lady in the hot tub who Bond steals the tape from.
I didn't pick her, but I picked another View to a Kill woman. Not Jenny Flicks, because she says one line of dialogue and then she's just kind of a background standee extra for the rest of it. Anyway, you want to go over yours first? We can hear
the top 10s. The top 10s. Okay, well then I'm gonna go. Number 10 is Xenia Onatopp. Famke Janssen from GoldenEye, and just crazy, amazing helicopter pilot who likes to kill with her legs. She is a henchman, but she is sexy. So I put her up there. And also, driving a car, I had a crush on Famke Janssen ever since Star Trek The Next Generation. And so when she showed up in GoldenEye, I was happy. So that's my number 10. And if you'd like, all right. Do you have, is it a specific number 10, or do you want me to keep rolling?
Keep rolling through your list, and then I'll get to mine.
Okay. And then I've got Aki, who is the first woman, the contact in You Only Live Twice. I like how she rescues Bond in the car, because that's also one of my favorite Bond cars. And it's too bad because she dies from the coolest way to assassinate someone ever, to kill someone with the poison on the thread. Really like that. Dink is my number 7. And I know you're going to laugh because it's just Dink and slaps the bum and man talk. But she was also I just found out she was also the dancer during the opening credits of Goldfinger. So she is my Goldfinger babe. Paula Kaplan from Thunderball. And that is also, it's sort of double because Martine Beswick was also one of the fighters From Russia with Love. And then, what do we got? Then it's Tiffany Case, because I really have a soft spot for Diamonds Are Forever, and I think she's foxy. Then we get to number 6, which is Vesper Lind. That's the only Bond woman from the Daniel Craig era that I have on the list at all. But I do absolutely love the portrayal by Eva Green, and I thought it reflected the character in the book really well. Then number 5 is Tracy, because Diana Rigg was smoking hot and on the Avengers, and I thought I really appreciated the characterization of her being willful and independent before Bond, even if it's Lazenby Bond, falls in love with her. Thought it was great, and I like that montage. Then this is where things get controversial. My number 3 is Sylvia Trench, seen twice, the only other than Moneypenny, who has been seen in multiple Bond movies. Love Sylvia Trench. Love her in the pajama shirt, and totally dug that she came back From Russia with Love. Then number 2, this shows how much I really, really enjoyed Thunderball. Fiona Volpe is my number 2, and I was quite taken with her, and I'd forgotten, because this is the first time in a long time that I've paid attention to Thunderball without thinking that it's boring. I actually watched it this time. And then my number 1 with a bullet will be in my favorite James Bond's License to Kill, Pam Bouvier, played by Carrie Lowell. It really reinvested my love of Law and Order when she arrived on that show as well. I like her as a CIA agent, being one of Felix's contacts, and she looks good with the short haircut. So, how do you think?
Yeah, okay, so now that I completely have forgotten about the Masterson sisters and threw them in there, I don't know why I just did. Okay, so I figured in 27th place, even though I didn't like her very much, I just put Honey Rider on there because she is memorable, even though of all the ones I dislike, I think she's kind of at the top of the list in terms of being the best of the ones I didn't like, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
For reasons we already went over before. I got Valenka, which is Lashif's girlfriend from Casino Royale. Very small role, but it works. That's 26. 25th, I got Domino from Thunderball. We'll be talking about tonight.
Yep.
24th, Madeline Swan from Spectre. 23rd, I've got Baki from You Only Live Twice.
Okay.
I thought she was really fun, bubbly personality. I was really sorry to see her go halfway through the film. 22, I got Rosie Carver from Live and Let Die. Kind of ditzy, but a memorable character all the same. It brings some humor to it. I especially love the bit where Bond's trying to seduce her at night, and she's like, Felix told me there would be moments like this. He's like, oh, really? What did he tell you to do? 2 cyanide capsules. I'm like, I love that. It's just, yeah, that was great. 21st, I got Tilly Masterson. 20th, I got Jill Masterson.
Mm-hmm.
19th, I have Anya Amasova, otherwise known as Triple X from The Spy Who Loved Me.
Mm-hmm.
18th, Tiffany Case. I kind of like that. She starts out kind of sassy, competent, and all that, and yeah, that kind of goes downhill throughout the movie, but I still like her character.
Yeah.
17th, Pam Bouvier from License to Kill. 16th, Tracy DiVincenzo from On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yep.
A character with not much consistency, but she had some good points. 15th, in a very bit role in like one scene, maybe less than a minute, Estrella Luna from the opening sequence of Spectre. The one.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, it froze. Just a second.
Nope. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So Estrella Luna, 15th, and 14th, I have Solange. She also only has like 2 scenes in the movie from Casino Royale. Wonderful little essay between her and Bond. She actually helps him out. She has a good time. He has a good time. Nothing creepy about it. It's a wonderful scene.
Yeah.
13th, Lucia Ciara from Spectre, played by Monica Bellucci. 12th place, I got Mayday from View to a Kill. A lot of great screen presence for her at Scene Stealer. 11th place, I have Xenia on the top. 10th place, I have Solitaire from Live and Let Die. 9th place, I have Camille from Quantum of Solace. I thought she was a really good actress, even though the character didn't really get to do much in the movie. 8th place, I have
Electra King. I'm assuming that's what you were going to say. Why is Electric King not in my top 10? I don't know.
All right, so yeah, 8th place Electric King, 7th place Vesper Lind from Casino Royale. 6th place Fiona Volpe from Thunderball. 5th place Severine from Skyfall.
Yeah.
Even though she also had a very bit role in that movie, but was just excellent. Bond totally should have saved her.
Yes.
4th place Wei Lin from Tomorrow Never Dies. 3rd Octopussy. 2nd Natalia Simonova from GoldenEye. And 1st Pussy Galore.
Yeah, it was a struggle. I don't like Pussy Galore, I find. And I mean the character. So it was strange for me not to find Pussy Galore on my list, but I couldn't. Even with some of the names, I would put Christmas Jones above Pussy Galore for myself. And it's just, there's something about Pussy Galore that I find off-putting. I don't know what it is. Oh, Steve.
Pop in here and I can run down my list. Do you want to just hear my 5 or do you want me to go 10?
10.
Go 10.
All right. So number 10, I have Pam Bouvier, License to Kill. Number 9, Natalia from GoldenEye. Number 8, Anna from The Spy Who Loved Me. Number 7 is Tatiana Romanov from Russia with Love.
Wow.
Number 6, Domino from Thunderball. Number 5, Solitaire, Jane Seymour from Live and Let Die. Love Jane Seymour. Number 4, I have Honey Rider from Dr. No. Number 3, I have Teresa from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Diana Rigg. Number 2, Pussy Galore from Goldfinger, Honor Blackman. And number 1, and this is because I just love Ava Green, Vesper Lynn from Casino Royale.
Fair enough.
That's my top 10s.
Well, and also, if anybody's watching, please tell us in the chat. Who do you find
what's your top
most
10?
capable? What's your top 10?
Or rank all 24. 24, right? 26? Whatever.
24 movies, but there tend to be multiple actresses in each of those films. So it was big. I left out a lot too.
Yeah, we'd love to know your list. So put your list in the chat, and we'll check that out. And I will pop back out and let you guys finish your conversation, and we'll see you at the end to go over to the chat. All right,
perfect.
Cool. Have a good one, guys.
Cheers. All right, Thunderball. So this is the first time seeing it in a while for me, and like I said, this is the first time I've actually paid attention to it and not anticipated it being boring and 4 hours long. I was surprised to see that it was only 2 hours and 10. And so when I sat down to watch it, I was really, really engaged until the parts that I knew I wasn't going to. So I stuck myself down and I watched. And I was like, these are actually pretty well choreographed scenes. And so it's not bad and I can follow it. I always thought it was confusing and stupid. But this time around, it was like, no, this makes sense. This is good. There's only one thing that I don't fully understand, but we'll talk about it when we get there. Why don't you kick us off, Kat?
Okay, so the film begins with Bond in France observing a funeral, and he spots that the grieving widow is, of course, somebody in disguise. He gets in a big fight, knocks the guy out, and he flees in this jetpack. And even as a little kid, I always thought this looked a bit clunky, probably because I'd already seen Star Wars and Boba Fett using his jetpack. So and with the helmet, which they made him put on and stuff, and the way it looked, it didn't seem like it fit his head fully because they weren't originally planning on giving him one. So It just, I never really liked this pre-title sequence. So he lands on the street and he gets help throwing the flaming hot jetpack inside the boot of the DB5, and they take off. Then we have what did you think about that sequence, Scott?
Well, you skipped over the yada yada yada. So anyway, no, he goes to the funeral and then he goes and he kills Jack. The initials are JB. I forget the name, but he's actually an agent of Spectre. We will find out soon enough. And so James Bond has killed a Spectre agent, and that's when he jumps onto the roof and uses the jetpack to go. But that was a real jetpack.
That's true.
That was a practical effect. So I thought that was awesome. Although at the end, when he just uses the cannons off of the back of the DB5, which makes a return, the DB5 just hosing the bad guys down, I thought, well, that was kind of cheesy. But
yeah,
it does kick into Thunderball by Tom Jones. Fantastic opening title credits with the dancers and the bravado of the song. What did you think of the song?
It took a long time for that one to kind of grow on me a bit. For the longest time, I thought, okay, but now I actually think it is pretty good.
So we close. Tom Jones has left the building.
Yeah. So elsewhere in France, Emilio Largo, played by Adolfo Celli, our villain in this film, he's otherwise known as Spectre Number 2. He shows up at this building, which looks like it's some type of social services center. Because you have all these people waiting with their kids and other families trying to get, and you hear somebody getting their claim denied or whatever. And he goes into the back room, and you have another glorious Ken Adams set. You got this really nice long table with all these Spectre agents sitting at it. There's a higher up counter where Blofeld's sitting behind a desk, but it's hidden by a privacy screen. And Number 2 apologizes for being late, and Blofeld's like, okay, we can begin the meeting. And so he starts getting updates from all of the different agents at the table as to how their various operations are going. And they're reporting the amount of money they've pulled in from various scams. One of which I got a big laugh out of was our consulting fee for the Great Train Robbery in Britain, which anybody who knows about that, it was a ridiculously overrated, convoluted, complete mess. And it's like, what, did you deliberately consult them on how to get caught, maybe? So eventually he gets down to this guy who tells them that they have less money pulling in from drugs that they thought they would get. And he's like, well, number one, we have competition from the cartels. And he's like, I factored that into my calculations. And the guy starts sweating bullets because he's worried because Blofeld's upset with him. And just like what happened with Kronstein in From Russia with Love, where you think Rosa Klev's the one who's going to get it, instead Blofeld hits the button, and the guy sitting next to the dude sweating bullets, who was super confident, just kind of chilling there, it gets electrified in his chair. And then the chair gets lowered down under clearly a future inspiration for Austin Powers.
Yeah.
and everybody else is kind of not even fazed by this, which I thought was kind of neat. It even cuts to Largo, and he's like flipping through the pages, kind of he kind of just glances over there like no big deal. So then he asks Number 2 to give his presentation, and he says that they've come up with a plan, their best ever. We're going to extort 100 million pounds, the equivalent of $280 million from the NATO. But he doesn't tell us how. He just says that he has his agent Count Lippy on in charge of this operation, or running the next segment of it. So it cuts to.
Before we cut to, I want to admire the fact that it is the same voice as it was in the previous. I froze again. I'll just keep talking and hope. There we go. So it is the same voice as Blofeld from the previous, from Russia with Love and from Dr. No. And one of the guys who's a Spectre agent was Mr. Grady in The Shining. He was the previous caretaker of the Overlook Hotel. And I was like, I know that guy. And I looked it up and I was like, yeah, no, that's awesome. So there's an obscure British actor shout out. Anyway, we cut to a spa.
Yes, it's Shrubland's spa. Bond is there because I guess he kind of injured himself with that jetpack, and he's getting like a massage or whatever. And Count Lippy walks up and kind of introduces himself. They shake hands, they're being cordial, and Bond notices that he has this like symbol on his arm, and Bond will later call Moneypenny to find out what it is. And she's like, well, it's a tong symbol. And Bond's like, I didn't think they were accepting, white British people into their ranks. And it's kind of funny because that plot point never really goes anywhere, considering that later in the movie you have Spectre agents wearing like octopus rings. Would have made a lot more sense if he was just wearing a Spectre ring, because they never do bring up the tong aspect ever again. So it's like, whatever. So Bond's at the clinic, and you get this really cringy scene where he goes to meet, I can't remember her name, but he goes into the next room and she's going to prepare him for this type of like back exercise. And he wraps his hands around her when she's measuring him and starts like forcing himself on her, and it's super cringy. It's like, and she's like, behave yourself, Mr. Bond. And so she takes him to this. Yeah, and so she takes him into this side room where he gets to lie down on this back stretcher. She jokingly calls it the rack. She straps him down and everything. She leaves, and then Count Lippy comes in. And he's like, oh, nice to have met you, Mr. Bond. And he cranks it up to, you got to wonder why this machine is designed to go to those dangerous levels in the first place.
Well, yes, exactly. So Bond, table traction or murder.
Exactly. So it starts stretching his back like crazy, and Bond's screaming for help, and he eventually kind of passes out or whatever. The woman comes back. She's like, "Oh, I don't know what could have happened. You must have accidentally hit the controls," even though it's obvious that he couldn't have done that. But Bond doesn't want to tell her what actually happened. He's going to investigate this himself. But before he does, he implies that he's going to rat her out to whoever runs this establishment. And she's like, "Oh, no, you wouldn't." He's like, "Oh, I would." And she's like, "Oh, no." And he's like, "Yes." And then hands down, the worst, cringiest scene in probably the entire franchise. He basically forces himself on her, even worse, it kind of rapes her in the back room. And then he leaves, and he says some flippant line like, "Oh, see you later, chill," or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. So he's walking down the hall. He notices that Count Lippy is in this whatever the machine, steamer or something. I can't remember what it is. But Bond goes in there and locks the door with a broom so he can't get out. And he's like, says some flippant line, "Oh, I'll see ya." Then the guy, which doesn't make sense because it's like, he just tried to kill you. And rather than, okay, you have him locked in here, but rather than interrogate him and find out why, you're just going to leave him there. And like,
yep.
Yeah, it's a little weird. So he goes back to his room and he notices that the guy next door is either like a burn victim or he's getting reconstructive surgery or something. And Bond's kind of suspicious because he sees that this guy's really paranoid, always looking around outside his room. Bond tries to sneak around inside the guy's room and has to hide from him and stuff. So he knows that there's something going on.
Yeah.
Then it cuts to kind of later that night where I guess he felt bad about raping the nurse.
Well, yes, he does return with a mink glove. It's supposed to relieve the tensions. It doesn't for her. So yeah, and she seems, the nurse does seem into it after a certain point, and it kind of it rings of pussy galore. And so it is rather creepy. So anyway, as we have discovered, Mr. Angelo, we cut away to Fiona Volpe with Brigadier Durant. Durant? Yes. They are in bed, and it has been because Count Lippy has been working with Angelo to get reconstructive surgery on Commandant Durant. Durant? I think it is. And so anyway, Mr. Angelo, who has been physically altered to be Brigadier Durant, gasses Brigadier Durant after he is called to his car, which is waiting outside. They swap the now downed Brigadier with Mr. Angelo, and Mr. Angelo is like, "Okay, you've given me $100,000 to do this. I want to. I'm not going to do it unless you give me $250,000. I'm on my own." And so they say, "Okay, we'll have the money ready for you anyway." So that means Mr. Angelo is on his way to the NATO airbase, which is just nearby. Now, he's taken the Brigadier's spot. This is all going meanwhile. Bond is still at the spa. Meanwhile, so Mr. Angelo goes to the NATO airbase and boards a fully stocked with 2 nuclear weapons Vulcan airplane. And it goes on a training sortie. But in the midst of all of this, Mr. Angelo has a gas canister as separate air supply, and he is going on the plane on the training mission. He gets a seat up in the co-pilot seat because there's a view there. He inserts the gas canister into the air supply of the plane, switches the air supply into his air supply. He puts his mask into his air supply, gasses the rest of the plane, takes control of the plane, and proceeds to fly it to Emilia Largo, number 2 from Spectre. So he goes to it and crashes the plane into the ocean. Now, the funny thing that I thought, every time that Emilio Largo, because he's waiting for this plane to come crashing his way, every time that he wants to activate something on the boat, he always says, "Activate the underwater." And it's like, you're on a boat. Everything's underwater, dude. So he says, "Activate the underwater landing lights," and then open the hatch as the plane crashes, sinks to the bottom of the sea. Please, Kat, what happens when Emilio Largo and his gang of goons go to the Vulcan to collect their quarry.
Well, the first thing Largo does is he kills the pilot, their imposter friend. He cuts his air supply and leaves him to die. Because not so much because he was going to do that to begin with, because Spectre, of course, in order to conduct business, does keep up some of their deals, but because the guy had been pushing them on the money at the very last second.
Yeah.
He kills them. They take the bombs to the Disco Volante, and then Largo mentioned, and they hide the Vulcan by pulling this camouflage tarp over it and like hammer it into the ground. They take the bombs back to the ship, and then he says to take coordinates to wherever they're going. They deliberately don't tell us where it's going exactly. We do get to see the Disco Volante come upon this little sand strip and small, tiny desert island where we assume they're going to deposit the bombs before he returns to his home back in Nassau the next day. Meanwhile, back at Shrublands, Bond decides to go back into this guy's room again to see what's going on, finds him lying dead, looks at him, he takes the bandages off and sees that he looks otherwise normal, like there's nothing wrong with his face. And it's like, okay. But it seems the goons have laid a trap for him. Bond manages to take them both out. He pulls the fire alarm to cause enough chaos and starts casually walking back to his room. And of course, the nurse runs out again, and she's like, you know what? And she sees what's going on here. This one lady walks up to him, and he's like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And she's like, oh, yeah, you had enough exercise for one night. So the next day, he leaves her behind, or he leaves her in a complete about face from how fed up she was with him in the beginning. She's, oh, James, they have to meet again, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, another time, different place. So he takes off in the DB5, and Count Lippy departs at his own Thunderbird. But he starts getting
before that, because that's when Emilio Largo, when they're still on the boat, says, Count Lippy, he sucks at training Spectre agents. We have to go and dispatch him. And so send the murder squad.
Yes. So Fiona Volpe takes off on her motorcycle, and this is like a nice tripped out motorcycle with rockets on it. She just blows up the car and just outright kills him. And Bond's driving around and actually kind of knows some of this, and she ends up ditching the bike in this like lagoon or whatever, and just kind of she gets away with it.
Yes. And also, I would like to point out that the car chase takes place on the widest roads in England. I have never known roads to be. I've heard stories of how narrow the roads are. It was clearly filmed at an airport.
Yes. Very clearly you could tell. So, okay, there we go. So Bond goes back to MI6 headquarters, and he walks in with Moneypenny, greets her, puts his hat on the rack, and he's about to go into M's office. He's like, in the main briefing room this time, something big. All the double O's are here, including the Home Secretary. And Bond's like, somebody probably lost their dog. So he goes into the room, and it's this absolutely glorious room. Looks more like something from the Louvre than something you'd find at MI6 headquarters. Not very practical, because you have Bond and all the 00 agents sitting way over on one end of the room. You got the briefing being held by M and the Home Secretary and Air Force Patrol way over on the other side. And they're talking, and they're like, we received this tape at 10 Downing Street today. And they play it, and it's Blofeld's voice. And he says he's stolen 2 atomic bombs. He lists the serial numbers. He says, if you don't pay us £100 million by X amount of time, we're going to, blow up a major city in the UK or the US. In fact, if you agree to our request, then tomorrow night at 6 p.m., have Big Ben chime 7 times instead of 6. And then we'll give you more instructions. So then they, they agree to do that. And can you take over for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. So they agree to do that. And so they've been dispatched within the radius of the Vulcan ship all around the world. Now, James Bond is supposed to be going to Canada. And this is one of the countries that James Bond has never been to in a film, but he says no, because when he opened up his For Your Eyes Only file, he saw a picture of Domino, and the man who was Mr. Angelo, the bandaged man from next door, or Brigadier Durant. Is it Durant?
Derval.
Derval. Thank you. Sorry for getting that wrong for so long. So Derval, and he says, well, if she's in Nassau, let's go follow that and check it out. And it's like, is it just because they're brother and sister, or is there something else? And he's like, oh, no, it's just because they're brother and sister. So
a bit on that's weird. Number one, just because he recognizes that, it doesn't mean that Bond personally has to be the one to go there. Like, M could have just given that information to whomever he had previously assigned to the Bahamas, but to say let's Bond go. Secondly, why doesn't Bond tell him anything else about the circumstances of what happened at Strobe once? He's like, oh yeah, I saw this guy there last night and he was dead. But he doesn't tell him that, oh, by the way, first this guy tried to kill me who was a member of the Tongs, apparently. And then they tried to kill me again when I found the guy dead in his room. And then there was this lady on a motorbike and they were shooting rockets and blowing up cars. He doesn't tell M any of this. And it's like,
no,
that's really weird. It's like, especially given the stakes are kind of high. But they're like, yeah, okay. So Bond goes to the Bahamas and meets his CIA contact, Paula. They're on a motorboat. They're in the harbor. They come up alongside Domino, and she's, she had been scuba diving and that kind of thing. And Bond kind of greets her in the water. It was like this little meet cute type thing. And then Paula, in this really cheesy moment, he pretends like his boat is having engine trouble, and he's like, "Oh, can I take a ride with you?" She's like, "Sure." And he's like, "Paula, you don't mind waiting for the service boat?" "Oh, no." So they go back to shore, and then you begin to notice that there's two guys watching them from the beach.
Yes.
One is this guy in a striped outfit. It's like, we don't really know who this guy is. Another guy in a really nice suit who looks way too overdressed for sitting at the beach and sticks out like a sore thumb is mystery man just kind of hanging out there. But Bond and Domino don't seem to notice. They go to eat lunch outside this, what was a real hotel at the time. Now it's abandoned, unfortunately. So they're having lunch and they're talking, and Domino cuts the meeting short because she mentions that her guardian is here. And Bond does pick up the fact that one guy was shadowing her. She's like, oh yeah, my guardian wants to watch me. Bond thinks it's kind of creepy, but she's just leaving anyway. He calls her Domino. She's like, how did you know my friends call me that? And he's like, well, it's on your ankle bracelet. So she's not exactly, not the sharpest character, but that's okay. So that night, Bond goes to meet her again at the club. And he goes into the casino. He finds Largo, and he's playing, they're playing Jim Rummy or whatever, or playing Bunko, and he's wearing a Spectre ring. And for reason, maybe it's because Bond's on a tight schedule because this is like a race against time type of thing. He just decides to blow his cover immediately by mentioning these little puns about Spectre. And every time he does it, Largo just gives him the look. And once Bond introduces himself, I think it stands to reason that because I was going to say it stands to reason that because Blofeld knows who Bond is, Largo might recognize the name as well. And he seems to kind of give a hint of recognition. He sits down, they're playing cards, and he asks if he could buy Domino a drink. Largo's like, sure, you can do that. So we go outside, they sit down, they're about to have dinner, and he says, I understand you're Largo's niece, which is really creepy because that's kind of what the movie is saying. And she's like, well, actually, I'm kind of his mistress or a kept woman. And I'm like, yes, time out. Somebody who is a kept woman doesn't say that about themselves usually. That's more like an observation that somebody else would make. So that was a little weird. And she's like, Bond keeps asking questions about Largo, but she doesn't want to talk about it. So they decide to dance instead. But Largo interrupts them, and they leave. And he asks her, Largo asks her when they get back in the boat, well, what about Mr. Bond? She's like, oh, he just wanted to know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And Largo's not going to press the issue because he doesn't want Domino to know that, he knows who this guy is.
Right. Well, and also, okay, just in terms of that relationship, before we move on any further, I was getting the impression this time around that Largo was manipulating Domino to get to the brother.
Right.
So I was under the impression, and Domino even says we met somewhere else. And,
yes, they met at Capri.
And I was attracted to him. So I think that she was sort of put under his spell as an influence to maintain her close to him so that there was some leverage with Derval. Was my impression of it. And then it just turned into being a kept woman, and that's why she eventually does what she does. But I thought it was a setup that it was like, yeah, I'm just sort of here. He takes care of me. I used to be with him, but I don't really care anymore. And she, even when they first dance, when Bond and Domino dance, she's like, Bond says, oh, you don't, or Domino is referring to her brother and says, he's such a good man. And then Bond is not like Largo or like me. And she says, no, you're not like Largo. You're so gentle, or the way you hold me, it feels better. And so I do get the dynamic. I think it was sort of a flattery thing or some way to find out, like, just gauge connections, or even be a needle to Largo, as in, well, the way she's talking about you, old man. That's how I took it. Anyway, continuing on with the plot.
So Largo thanks Bond for, buying her dinner, even though they didn't get to eat it. And he invites Bond to lunch. And he's like, come to lunch on Saturday at my house at Palmyra. And Bond's like, oh, okay, great. So the next day, Bond's at his hotel room, and he's scanning the place to see if there's any bugs around. And sure enough, he does find a recording tape of somebody trying to spy on him. He's very careful about that. And he hears a noise, and he suspects that there's somebody in there, but then there's a knock at the door. So he opens it, and then it's the man. Of course, we know Felix is revealed. And he's like, oh, hi, 00. And he just punches him right in the chest. And he says, shh. So he puts him aside. He sneaks back into the bathroom. He finds out that this guy's hiding in the shower. He turns on the hot water, bangs him over the head, but then he just mentions his name anyway. He's like, sorry, Felix, you forgot to name 007. It's like, well, if you didn't kill him, he's still going to hear that, So he gets the guy.
He punched him. He punched him for almost being Jack Lord. This guy is almost Jack Lord.
Yeah, he's better than the last guy. So he tells this guy, this goon Quist, to go back. Go report to your friends what's going on here. Go get out of here. And he has Felix give him his gun back. The guy leaves. He races back to Palmyra. Largo's really upset because he didn't provide any useful information. And he's like, you let Bond get the better of you. And then he feeds him to his sharks because, of course, Largo has a shark bowl.
Who doesn't? It's not.
Yeah, yes, great bit. So then Bond and Felix go to MI6's the CIA little hideout, this little shack by the lake, and they hear on the tape from London that the British did in fact get Big Ben to chime 7 times, and Bond's like, oh, it must be to buy time. He comes down the stairs, and then Q walks in, and Q is dressed in his like Benihana shirt and his khaki shorts, and he's really unhappy about having to be in the field, and he shows him some gadgets, the infrared underwater camera, which Bond at first isn't really impressed by. He shows him a Geiger counter and a watch, this rebreather device, and then in a really weird edit, the Q kind of turns to the left, and he says, "Now pay attention," but his mouth isn't moving at all.
I did notice that, yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird. And the thing he gives him that he wanted him to pay attention to was this pill, which is like serves as its own tracking device, which is really weird. And he's like, Bond's like, what do I do with this? And Q's like, obviously, you swallow it. And giving him a minute to see if he was going to say something. And Bond's like, no, he doesn't want to do that. So they take off. So he leaves the place with Felix. Decides that they kind of need to check out the Disco Volante. So so they go. He gets his scuba gear, goes over to finds a Disco Volante, takes underwater pictures of it, revealing the hatch underneath the boat. So goons are trying to stop him.
This is the first elongated underwater scene where there is no dialogue. There is just the music, which is fantastic. And the underwater fight photography is great. The stuntmen are fantastic. But this is the part where I'm like, all right, we're slowing down. Yeah,
the scene goes a little too slow. After he gets the pictures, they go back to the little ramshackle base, and they're analyzing the pictures, and they can tell, okay, and they report that back to MI6. And Paula, in a really funny bit, she's telling them that, I can get the printouts. And as she's speaking, her dialogue starts cutting out, and then there's a white pan just totally cutting her off. I'm just like, oh, okay, I guess she's not very valued by the screenwriters or the editor. So then Bond and Felix are in a helicopter later that day. They're flying around looking for signs of the Vulcan. They can't find it, and they fly past Palmyra. And he looks down, and he sees Largo and Fiona standing on the ridge with shotguns. And he sees all these other guards there patrolling the area. And after their flight, Bond decides that he's going to go keep the lunch date, which is a bit surprising because he already kind of blew his cover with this guy. He's already had fights with his, goons underneath the boat. But he thinks it's a good idea to go in there. But he might have his pistol on him, but it just seems like a really dumb idea. You've seen that this place is armed. The guys are armed to the teeth. And you're just going to walk in and keep the lunch date. And the only reason he lives is because Fiona reasons to Largo that, hey, we don't know if he actually really knows anything about us yet. Maybe we should, chill out and let him go. Oh, and I did forget to mention that the night before, after he made his escape from taking those photos, Fiona picked him up on the side of the road and drove him back to the hotel. And that's when he first saw the Spectre ring. for going back into the hotel. So Fiona's basically telling Largo that, yeah, we shouldn't kill him, blah, blah, blah. And Largo reluctantly agrees. So Bond shows up for the lunch date. He sees Domino swimming in the pool. He helps her out, tries to flirt with her. Largo shows up and brings drinks. And in a really weird bit, he singles out Vargas, who is his kind of quiet, kind of eerie, offbeat henchman. And he says, Vargas, I forget, you do not drink. You do not smoke. You do not make love. What does Vargas do? I'm like, this is really weird. It's like, whatever it is.
He kind of felt like Lurch crossed with Red Grant. It's almost like Largo got his own Red Grant.
He did. Yeah, so it's a very weird bit. They're standing on the edge and going to do shooting skeets or whatnot. And this is where one of the permanent problems with the film really shines, which is that they did a really bad job in the restoration, because throughout the Bahamas sequences in this movie, you see smudges and dirt and hair. Mm-hmm. And when they went to retrieve the bombs, you even see like a crack on the lens. And it's like, you would think a movie that was as popular and successful as this one would have had a better preservation job and better restoration, but it's distracting.
I have a theory. It is produced by Kevin McClory, right?
Yes.
This is the only of the originals that was not produced by Saltzman and Broccoli.
Correct.
And even when in the special features on the Blu-ray, the making of, narrated by Patrick McNee, that at the end of that, it says, with very special thanks to Barbara Broccoli and Richard L. Wilson? Michael, stupid me. Anyway, so there is a lot of, and we'll talk about the production hell that was Kevin McClory and what happened subsequently. But I think that's part of the reason why the restoration sucks, because I have never seen a print of it that goes to the end credits that says James Bond will return. Never seen it.
That's true.
And so I do think that it has something to do with the rights and how it maintains within the Eon catalog proper. However, yes, I agree with you. The restoration is not that good.
Yeah, it's not that good. So so Largo's talking about, the skeets, it's not as easy as it looks. And of course, Bond just does it in a second without even having to aim. Perfect. Really great. So they continue walking down by he doesn't go over to look at the shark pool, but they're kind of walking along, or they do look at the shark pool for a little bit. And Largo comes up with this great idea. He's like, why don't you take Domino to the Junkanoo celebrations tonight? And Bond's like, okay. So then he leaves. He goes back to the hotel. And so basically, Largo's bought time. And while this lunch date has been going on, Fiona, who must have slipped out right when Bond showed up, she goes back to the hotel and kidnaps Paula. And snoops around the room to find out what Bond knows.
And ultimately, and is this when she finds herself in the bath?
No, not
okay.
So she kidnaps Paula, finds the photographs that Bond took. So that this lets her know how much Bond knows about them.
Right.
Then they're going to take Paula back to Palmyra. Later that night, Bond he meets up with Domino at the big celebration, the big parade and all that. And Felix shows up, and Domino's like, hey, that guy's trying to get your attention. And Felix screams to Bond, Paula's gone. He's like, what do you mean she's gone? Oh, she checked out. He says that she checked out of the hotel. So I guess Fiona tried to cover her tracks in that way, which is smart. Mm-hmm. So Bond races to Palmyra. He sneaks in, opens this almost like those little shutter doors going like to the under basement of the place. Yes. He goes in there and he overhears Vargas and this other scientist there, the nuclear scientist. And he's like, what did you do to her? And he's like, I didn't do it. It was cyanide capsules. And they hear the alarms go off because Largo says her the Bond is, there's a trespasser. Bond goes in the side room and he sees Paula dead. So she's pretty dedicated to the cause.
Well, no, you know what? I thought that was Vargas just lying to the doctor, because the doctor's a little bit of a wuss and he bails later on. And so I thought he actually killed her. I thought Vargas killed her.
He might have. So the alarm's going. Bond decides it's time to go. Strangely, he doesn't think to snoop around Palmyra to find any other clues. He just figures, I'll go. Never mind the fact that we still got to find these atomic bombs and that, time's ticking. So and also a weird moment, when he leaves the basement, he opens the door and you see it actually fold and slam down, but there's no sound at all. It's just true. Really very weird. So Largo comes around. They start, shooting. Bond tricks them to start shooting at each other. Tries to make he can't get over the wall, so he decides he's going to climb over the roof. loses his gun, and then he jumps back down to try to retrieve it. Ends up getting cornered by a goon. They fight. They fall into the pool, and Largo had him dead to rights. They could have shot him dead right there in the pool, but because he's evil, he says, "No, I got a better idea." So they hit this switch. It seals the pool shut, and he has a guy open the gate so the sharks come in. Bond stabs the guy he was fighting, which serves as probably a good distraction for the sharks because they can go over and eat that guy instead. There's a few instances here where you clearly see the glass pane, like when Bond's like goes like this, goes up against the wall, whatever. This is another scene which I feel isn't nearly as exciting as it should be because of the slow underwater type pacing to it. He gets out, and depending on which version of the film you see, he gives two different types of quips, which is interesting. In one version, "Oh boy, better luck next time," to the shark that he's saying it to. And then in another line, he says something, I can't remember the other line, but it's kind of weird. There's different versions of this movie floating around. So he goes back to the hotel, and this is where he finds Fiona in the bathtub, which is great because she's once again covering her bases. She probably expected, she didn't know he was going to find out about, Paul and all that. So she probably waited there thinking he's going to show up with Domino. Instead, it's just him, and they're flirting back and forth a bit. She gets out of the bathtub. He brings her their towel. At first, she was only going to put on the shoes. And she grabs the towel. So, then it cuts to them. They've slept together, and they have the camera shot through the bars on the edge of the bed. Yeah, because he's like, "Oh, you should be in a cage," because she kind of bites him playfully, and she wants to stay there and relax a while. But he's like, "No, we got to get going to the Junkanoo because I agreed to meet up with some friends, and maybe you know them, the Largos." And she's not very interested, but she relents. So they get dressed and they're about to leave, and he opens the door to his room and sees Vargas and Largo's other goons standing there. He slams the door immediately, but Fiona pulls out a gun, and he's like, "Oh, okay." And then he opens the door, very cordial and polite now. "Oh, welcome in. Come on in." So they search him, and Fiona's surprised because she didn't even notice the Bond had a gun on. She's like, "Wow, you got dressed so quick. I didn't see that." So then he's talking, and she's like, and he tells her, "Oh, sleeping with you brought me no pleasure, blah, blah, blah." And then she says one of my favorite lines in the movie, which I got queued up here. She says,
"Oh, no, I don't know the line this well. Cat, come back." Okay,
so first, Bond said to her, "Oh, my dear girl, don't flatter yourself. What I did this evening was for king and country. You don't think it brought me any pleasure, do you?" And she says, "But of course, I forgot your ego, Mr. Bond. James Bond, who only has to make love to a woman before," and she sees stars and hear the heavenly choirs singing. "She repents, then immediately returns to the side of right and virtue, but not this one." And it's like, did they just incessantly mock their own logic to why Bond saved the Dan Goldfinger?
Yes.
That's exactly what they did.
I think it was a meta commentary, but also it's in direct relation to his relationship with Domino as well, for what eventually does occur, not necessarily through the love making of James Bond, but it does happen to another Bond girl in this movie.
Yeah, and having watched it so recently with Goldfinger, it just really sticks out. I'm like, man, I wonder if that's more of a McClory line, or maybe the producers thought they had to have a laugh at themselves. That was really funny. So they leave. They take, rather than just killing him in the hotel, which would have been smart, they take him to this car. They're driving him probably back to Palmyra, and they get caught up in the traffic of all the Junkanoo celebration parade. And this panhandler comes up to the car trying to sell him some alcohol. He doesn't want any of it. So as Fiona's lighting a cigarette, Bond simultaneously knocks this guy's alcohol bottle, spilling it all over the bench seats, and then knocks her cigarette down, and it causes almost like a mini explosion, which is ridiculous. You see it's like a smoke bomb, and then it starts catching fire. He takes off and runs into the crowd, and he actually gets shot. He gets shot in the ankle. He starts limping. He's bleeding. They're following him. A pretty good sequence, actually, when he's trying to evade them through the crowd. And a few things pop out in the crowd. You see the black Superman I alluded to last week, a guy dressed in a Superman outfit walking through the parade. And,
I missed Black Superman.
Yes, he has a few shots inside in the parade. It's pretty cool. And then you have the shot of the dog center screen taking a piss, and it's like, how did they miss that? They could have gotten another shot. Anyway, so Bond manages to escape the parade. He gets to goes to hide in the Kiss Kiss Bang Bang Club. He goes into the bathroom there and just gets some paper towels to wrap over his leg as if it's just a minor flesh wound, and then inexplicably inexplicably, he's no longer limping at that point, just because he put a little paper towel bandage on it. It's like, okay.
He's got a bit of a hobble, a little bit of a hobble.
Yeah. Okay. So he goes back into the club, which is like an outdoor club thing amongst the palm trees, and he sees Largo's goons are all there. He figures he can't escape, so he decides to basically kidnap this woman from the bar to take her up for a dance. And I constituted as kidnapping because I don't doubt, with the stakes being as high as they are, trying to find the bombs and all that, that if necessary, he would probably use her as a human shield.
Yeah, sure.
So they're about to dance, and then Fiona shows up, and she's like, "Mind if I cut in?" And she's like, "You should have told me your wife was here."
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that she literally was kidnapped. It's like, now that you mention it, I'd love to. Grabs her, goes to the dance floor, just arbitrarily starts dancing with her, and then she's all like, instead of help, I'm being accosted by a stranger. It's like, oh, there are other women here with you? Why did you bother? I thought that was kind of ridiculous. Anyway,
it was very ridiculous. So he's slow dancing with Fiona, and he notices that one of Largo's goons is raising the gun behind the drummer at the front set, and he times it very well. He waits and he spins her around, and sure enough, he does use her as a human shield. But it's almost like it was an impossible shot, because when you see the shot's been taken, there's no blood, there's no bullet hole. Bond's fingers are just there, and it's like he then moves his fingers a little bit, and it starts bleeding. You see the hole. It's like, no, man, your fingers would have been blown off by that bullet. But okay,
I chalk it up to 1960s violence.
Yeah, 1960s violence. So he sits her down at the table, and that these other people are sitting at as well. It's like, oh, I hope you don't mind a friend here. She's just dead.
Yep.
Yeah. So
stolen by commando many years later. Anyway.
Yeah, so he leaves the Junkanoo celebrations, and this whole time I'm feeling like we're really missing Domino, because he left her there a long time ago, because he left, had to go to Palmyra. He came back to the hotel room instead of going back to find her, and it's like I'm feeling like we should be checking in with this character. And then so he comes back. We find out back at MI6 headquarters that Spectre said, we want the money in diamonds, and you're going to drop them off the coast of Burma at this very specific latitude, longitude point. And the Home Secretary is getting very frustrated and upset. And Moneypenny comes in the room and slips M this piece of paper. And he's like, oh, there's this update from 007, presumably about the Disco Volante, the pictures. And the Home Secretary is not impressed. He's like, yeah, I wish you probably put faith in better people than this guy. He just totally throws Bond under the bus because he's not satisfied with him. But I do like that M in this movie, that's the second time now where he actually really does stick up for Bond. Like when the guy who was going to be his Canadian liaison, had he gone to Canada, says, oh, it's impossible. That guy couldn't have been at Shrublands. And M's like, nope, if he says he was there, I believe him. And just like here, when the Home Secretary throws him under the bus, he once again sticks up for Bond, which is kind of neat, even though they have a very almost adversarial, frustrated type relationship with each other. So then we go back to the Bahamas. Bond and Felix decide to try and find the Vulcan again. This time they succeed. Bond goes down there, and they try and have a little bit of suspense with the sharks swimming around. And Bond goes inside the plane, and he finds all the bodies, and he sees the bombs are missing. So he cuts his way out of the top to avoid the top of the plane canopy to avoid the sharks. Gets back to Felix, who, by the way, shot a shark to distract the other ones.
Yes. Now, are sharks cannibalistic?
If they're hungry enough, I guess, but I don't think they would naturally do that unless, now that it's bleeding. So I guess,
it'll just distract the sharks. It'll be fine.
So he gets back to Felix, and it's like, okay, we found it. We should, we can't find the bombs though. They're not there. And he has an idea though of who we can ask. So he goes to meet Domino, who's once again scuba diving. Bond goes down and meets her under there, and you have this weird implied underwater sex scene, which is
I don't understand this at all, because this is when we check back in with Domino, and they even after they leave, they descend behind some coral, and as they're walking out of the ocean onto the beach, Bond even says to Domino, "Hope we didn't frighten the fish." And it's like, what do you think you did, buddy?
Yeah, and the fact that she really doesn't know him. She's run into him a few times, but barely, barely much of a conversation even, because she's always in a hurry or something happens and their meetings have been cut short, and she's already having. It's like, okay, 1965, I guess. They're walking back up. They're walking back up the beach, and she steps on like a stinger fish or something, and she's like, "Oh, they're poisonous." So they lie down on the beach towel. Bond tells her to roll over, and he like sucks the poison out or whatever. And then he says, I'm sorry, but I have to hurt you again. She's like, what do you mean? And he shows her the watch and dog tags from her brother, and he tells her what's going on, and she doesn't really want to believe it. She starts crying because she figures there's no other choice but to believe it. And he says he really needs her help. And they, interestingly enough, they cut away because they don't want you to hear what he's going to tell her in its entirety. Mm-hmm. And you see Vargas has shown up. Why he's there, I don't know. He's just randomly there. He's sneaking up on them. And Bond's talking to her, and she actually does a pretty good job at keeping cool about it. She's like, Vargas is behind you. And Bond kind of keeps cool about it, too. And then he spins around and shoots him dead with a spear gun, pinning him to the tree. And he's like, oh, I think he got the point, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And quick. Bond gives Domino the camera, which doubles as like a Geiger. Yeah, so he gives her the camera. Yeah, and then they're going to say goodbye. And she's like, oh, James, following it. And you have this. And when he has the sunglasses on, he kind of reminds me of Felix for a second there. And looking like, had super cool type suave appearance. And he's like, oh, I'll do it for you. And she finally does tell him something useful, that there's this little bridge and canal thing on the other side of the island that leads up to the back of Palmyra. He never lets anybody go there. Maybe it's important. So Bond's like, oh, yes, it's very important. So he goes there in just these little swim shorts. He didn't think to bring anything else with him. Once again, doesn't seem logical given what Largo's up to and all that. He finds that there's some scuba gear deposited nearby in the canal. So he decides to hide out and wait until dark. Largo, and again, this is in light of the fact that we're waiting on trying to find some atomic bombs and the time's ticking, and he's just kind of, he's going to hang out for several hours and wait and hope somebody shows up to pick up the scuba gear. So Largo and his guys do show up. Bond knocks one of them out and puts on his scuba gear in full view of the other guys, but they don't see him, even though he was wearing
He was last in line. And so, they're getting all geared up so that they can go and collect the bombs to be put on the Disco Volante so that they can go and do their thing. They go underwater for another lengthy battle. Yeah,
I thought it was smart, actually, that they first swam underwater to board the ship, to board the Disco Volante. They didn't want everybody to notice that, because certainly they've picked up at this point that Bond's been onto him. So he knows that there's some, Largo figures that we're being watched. So it's actually pretty smart to scuba dive just to get into the ship by coming through the underwater hatch. They then sail off to that little island again. He then goes back, they again scuba dive back out of the ship into this neat doorway that's got hydraulic lines and everything holding it open. And you find that the atomic bombs are sitting there on this rack in this cave. And word to the wise, don't store atomic bombs in salt water.
Thank you for the tip. I will pay attention next time I'm storing nuclear weapons.
So they take the bombs, they hook them up onto this kind of orange submarine craft type thing, and Largo spots Bond. He recognizes him, and then the fight begins. And Largo successfully gets Bond trapped in here because he closes the doors and seals them in. Bond kills the other goons that were there, but he can't get out. He finds an escape through a canopy with a flare that he's got, but he can't get out. And so he, having already taken the pill that Q had given him, Felix is flying around the area in his helicopter trying to find Bond. And since it's no longer, at this time, this whole sequence was happening was kind of dark. It was still before dawn. Well, now it's a lot brighter later in the afternoon. I'm thinking the Disco Volante has got to be long gone by now, So Bond shoots the flare out through the cove, and Felix signs up. He picks him up. He tells him the bombs are on the Disco Volante. They make some phone calls, and then we have the bombs are now being taken from the Disco Volante towards Miami Beach.
Right.
Because Miami Beach is a target. They're heading there, and you have all the Marines taking off out of the airplane of the C-130. They're all diving, and they got their scuba gear on and all that stuff. Bond goes down with them, and you have a big underwater fight scene. Now, the first half of it I didn't like because it had little to no music, and it was just kind of, which made it seem really slow and not that interesting. But then it picks up in the second half. The music really gets going. I like that Bond and Largo are largely leading the charge. It's not just constantly cutting away to random extras all the time. It's it keeps those two front and center, which I really liked.
Also, I like, in terms of the battle, I really enjoy how Bond is helping out the other guys. So when when they're fighting, he's cutting the hoses for gas, for air, and there is a geography to it, and he's helping, and it's okay, you all right? Yeah, let's go. It's really cool.
Oh, and of course, I did forget to mention that Largo had since found out that Domino was working against him because he caught her with the Geiger counter camera device on the boat. And so they get back. He gets back on the Disco Volante, you know, because he had already been trying to torture her with ice cubes and a cigar. And the most Snidely Whiplash moment in the entire franchise is a bit ridiculous. And you can tell the nuclear scientist guy is a bit not really in it. Like, he must have thought that they would never actually fire the bombs. They were just going to ransom him, because he's kind of iffy about her getting tortured. And he saves her from that and unties her. When he finds out that Largo apparently is actually going to bomb Miami Beach, even though at this point it still seems like they're going to pay the ransom. But it seems like he's going to bomb it anyway. And he says this is too much for him. He doesn't want it in on this. So he unties her, and he mentions that he already took the firing pins out of the bomb and threw it overboard, because the Marines had already retrieved one of the bombs. Largo had taken the other one aboard the boat. And it's like, okay, so the firing pins are out. So the stakes are kind of, you know, gone now. Because yes, the bomb.
Yes.
The bomb could potentially blow up, but it's not going to be a nuclear explosion anymore. So Bond climbs on the Disco Volante. It takes off at high speeds. He jettisons the hydrofoil, which is an awesome sequence. You finally see the Navy showing up, which should have happened a long time ago. Like, why Felix and Bond are the only two people looking for this bomb in this entire region of the world, I don't know.
Well, but it's an amazing, once the Navy shows up, and then the hydrofoil, it takes off on full speed. The cocoon starts spouting smoke to obscure the escape of the hydrofoil. The hydrofoil peels away, and Bond is on one of the struts. And it's like, and how did that happen? How did you get there? They never show.
Didn't he climb onto it before it took off?
Did they show that? Did I miss that? Was I zoning out that hard from the end of the underwater?
Maybe you're right. Maybe they didn't show it. You're right. So so they take off. And then once he jettisons the hydrofoil, they actually have this giant machine gun that they have mounted on there as well. And they start trying to make a last stand to defend themselves because they know they're screwed. Mm-hmm. So Bond fights his way into the bridge of the ship. He starts fighting Largo and his goons. And you have some really bad rear projection, which it seems like they sped up the rear projection much faster than the ship itself is actually shown to be going in the establishing shots. So they're spinning the ship around, they're fighting, and Largo eventually gets Bond cornered. He's about to kill him, and then he gets speared in the back by Domino. And Largo falls. A wonderful moment. She falls over dead, and she's like, "I'm glad I killed him." And he's like, "You're glad," because Largo once again had him dead to rights. He sees that the boat is hurling towards this sandbar or coral reef or whatever, and he tries to stop it, but he can't move Largo off the controls. And he sees the nuclear scientist guy. He's like, "Who's this?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know, but he helped me."
Yeah, exactly.
And Bond's like, "I hope you know how to swim." And he gives him the little life preserver thing and just pushes him off the boat. He and Domino jump overboard. And while they did not blow up the real Disco Volante, they did have a model that they rammed into the coral reef. And the explosion was so big that it shattered windows 30 miles away.
Yes.
Which is awesome. They don't do that anymore.
No. Well, and so apparently it was experimental jet fuel, and they didn't have time to. Didn't have time to test it, so they blew it up. And the only reason they got away from it is because they were on the other side of that ridge. Yep.
Then Bond, there's this giant raft which was just kind of there. I don't recall seeing Bond throw it in the water. Or no, that's right. The plane. Yes, right. The plane. The B-52 comes by, drops the raft. Bond and Domino get in. They hook up, and it's like one of those.
The skyhook?
Yeah, one of the skyhooks, like from Batman. And so he flies by, it picks up Bond and Domino. They take off happily ever after. And you're right, as the credits roll, not only does it not say that James Bond will return, but they don't even give you time to read the rest of the credits. It just fades to black and cuts out like really fast. And it's like very weird, very shoddy, and of course even and lots of more dirt and grime and cracks on the screen, and so that's Thunderball.
That is Thunderball. Now the thing is, and this is sort of the footnote in the addendum that has to be included with every recounting discussion of Thunderball, is that Thunderball was the 8th novel by Ian Fleming, and they were intending to bring James Bond to the movies before Dr. No. It was intended to have a co-screenplay with McClory, someone else. I forget the third gentleman's name.
Whittingham.
I'm sorry?
It's Jack Whittingham.
Jack Whittingham. And Ian Fleming, Kevin McClory, and Jack Whittingham were to write this screenplay, and Ian Fleming just stopped caring about writing a screenplay, wrote the 9th book, incorporating the story that they had tried to hash out in the screenplay for Thunderball. So when Thunderball finally made it to the big screen, Kevin McClory felt that who had bigger aspirations towards being a film producer than being a writer. He said that the inspiration for Thunderball was co-created by him. There was a negotiation was it with Ian Fleming, or was it how did it sorry?
So what happened was Ian Fleming would write the Bond novels at GoldenEye in Jamaica in the first 2 months of one of the people he based the character on was his best friend Ivor Bryce, who was also lived in Jamaica. And he Ivor came to him with the idea that we should make these into movies. These would make great movies. And he introduced him to his producer friend, Kevin McClory, whom he knew, who also had a residence down there. And Kevin didn't like any of the novels to do straight-up adaptations because he thought the character was a bit stale because there was no humor in any of the books. He didn't like the whole Smirch thing. He thought that, you don't want to get that political. So he says, hey, let's collaborate. We'll make a script. We'll do a movie. And because at the time, Kevin had a movie that was going to be coming out which was the British selection for the entry into the Venetian Film Festival, Ian thought, okay, this guy's got clout. So they collaborated on the script with Jack Whittingham, who's a guy that Kevin hired. And Jack is credited, according to Richard Maibaum, who wrote a lot of the Bond scripts. He says he kind of looked at the Thunderball script and that he did pick up it. He was inspired to take some of the humor from the Thunderball script, which Jack Whittingham put in there, like Bond's trademark wit and humor, and put it in the scripts of the movies because that humor is not in the books. And that's one of the key ingredients I find to Bond's success. So that's a significant contribution. Kevin and Jack also came up with the idea of Spectre instead of Smirch and the Blofeld character. Kevin came up with the idea of let's set it in the Bahamas because I'm really familiar with it and it'll be an exotic location. People will love it. And then the whole nuclear bomb plot. So really Kevin and Jack contributed a significant chunk of the story. And they were going to take it to MCA, the production studio. But because by that time, the film that he was being entered in the Venetian Film Festival had bombed and people didn't really like it very much, Ian at that point just lost complete faith in Kevin and didn't show any sense of loyalty at all. And he says, look, I'll recommend when we go to the meeting at MCA that you should be the producer. But if they don't want to do it specifically because you're a producer, because of your last movie, then you either sell your interest in the movie, you back out and get nothing, or you can file a lawsuit, which is really kind of dark. The project, sure enough, fell apart. At one point, they were going to have Alfred Hitchcock direct it as a TV movie because that's what, Hitchcock was doing that with this whole Alfred Hitchcock Presents show. That fell apart. And so Ian decided to just take the script and write a novel and not give Jack or Kevin any credit. But Kevin read the book before it was released. He got a hold of a pre-release copy, and they immediately filed a lawsuit. It went to court in late November 1963. Ian lost the case, and he had to pay $52,000 to cover Kevin's legal fees, and he had to pay $35,000 for damages. And he voluntarily at that point surrendered any screen rights to the movie, and he had to, from then on out, any reproductions of the novel will give credit to Kevin and Jack for having worked on it. So then fast forward to Goldfinger. That was about to come out, and by then Kevin was kind of upset because they'd already used Spectre twice in the first two movies. And again, he didn't get any credit for that either. That was something creative with it. So he was rightly upset. Ian, by the way, did have a heart attack in December during the trial in November 63 because he was under a lot of stress because apparently his friends down in the Bahamas, they were kind of taking sides. Some were on Ian's side, others were on Kevin's side. And so it was stressing him out a lot. He had a heart attack. He survived it. And then 8 months later, he died of another heart attack in the Bahamas. And that was about a month before Goldfinger had its premiere. And so Cubby and Harry, who did not want to alienate Ian, were ready to go to court with Kevin, which they really didn't want to do. But because Ian died, there was no reason for Cubby and Harry not to work with Kevin. So they made a deal with them and said, hey, we'll let you be sole producer on Thunderball as the next movie. In exchange, you let us use Spectre and all those related characters for the next 10 years. And Kevin agreed to the deal. And that's why Blofeld is the main villain for the next 3 movies, because they wanted to get as most out of that as they could. And so he got his money and screen rights, and he produced the movie. And for the most part, I thought he did a great job as producer. I thought that was, a fine job. But he didn't end up becoming a big shot producer after that, which is a bit ironic, because this actually, not only did this movie make the most money out of any Bond film released in the 60s. It had a huge merchandising push behind it. John Steers won an Oscar for special effects because apparently, as I understand it, the underwater stuff they did was the equivalent to underwater photography in film that the space special effects in 2001 was for Stanley Kubrick and those guys a few years later. So it was like a really bang up job that Kevin did. But for some reason, I mean, a lot of the Bond community and the pundits and all that kind of paint Kevin as the villain, but really he's not. I mean, if Ian had just given him the credit and, just given him the credit on the book, then that would have been the end of it. And it wouldn't have turned into a huge thing. And, you got to give Kevin credit for coming up with Spectre and the humor of Bond, because that's just, they've gotten tons of mileage out of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, and when it comes to critics of Kevin McClory, I think a lot of that is laid at the feet of Never Say Never Again and the nature of that. And there were some rifts, like based on Never Say Never Again, which is a flat out remake of Thunderball. But that doesn't matter because Moonraker is pretty much a remake of Thunderball as well. So there are a lot of legal issues with that. But I understand Kevin McClory's side on it, and I don't find him to be, well, I'd have to look into it a bit more. I only know this particular tale. I do know that in terms of, again, the special, I poured through the DVD and went through the behind the scenes stuff, and they don't really talk about Kevin McClory that much, but whenever they talk to the actress who played Paula or Fiona or Domino, they all say, I was pampered. This was by far the best experience of my career, let alone my life. There was champagne everywhere. It was absolutely fantastic. It is also, and just in terms of the production itself, this is the last one where I feel like Sean Connery is truly invested in the character. I've never had issues with him. I enjoy You Only Live Twice, or to see the mileage on the character in his performance there. We'll talk about that next week. But this is the last one where it's like the end of the heyday. Yeah,
and the reason that they don't really talk about Kevin other than the people they're interviewing is because Eon, aside from having the film rights, also has the rights to the Ian Fleming Foundation as well, and they have the rights. So they naturally don't want to alienate them, because Ian's wife actually did blame Kevin for Ian's death. She said, oh, the trial really stressed him out and gave him that heart attack, and that set him up for the next one. It's like, that's pretty dark, but that's why they don't talk about it. But you're right, everybody loved it, so whatever. So the movie turned out to be done very well for its time.
Yes.
But so getting to the problems I have with the movie, the underwater sequences for the most part are way too slow. You can cut out, like, once we get the idea that the Vulcan has crashed underwater, they're retrieving the bombs. We don't need to see the entirety of them pulling the camouflage net over it, hammering it down, and the entirety of taking the bomb back to the Disco Volante and parking it. Same thing when Bond goes to take the pictures underwater, and when he does find the Vulcan bomb. It just slows the movie down so much. And even the shark pool scene where Bond's trying to avoid the sharks, I thought was also slowed down a bit. So I think you could easily shave like 20 minutes out of this movie and it would improve the pacing stuff a lot.
Well, also, there are lingering shots on underwater life too. Right. They really enjoy being underwater.
And of course, cut the cringy, rapey stuff out of the shrub ones. Yeah, the movie doesn't need that. And even the shrub one stuff, in general, I don't tend to like Bond films that much when they tell the audience exactly what's going on up front, and you're kind of waiting for Bond to play catch up. So for me, I didn't feel like the movie really got going until M gives him the dossier at the big briefing room. Like and that's a third of it's 40 minutes into the film. So that kind of, to me, that kind of hurts it, and then the underwater pacing hurts it. But for the rest of it, I was fine with the story, and I think I do again like it a little better each time. It's just that the restoration wasn't done too well. But like in some instances, you actually see hair on the screen and the cracks. I was like, but yeah, I have fun. What do you think of it, Scott?
I really I like it now. I think I like it better than From Russia with Love. I enjoyed it a lot more this time around, and also in terms of times ticking, looking for those nuclear weapons. I never got why he was always looking at his watch, because it's also the Geiger counter, and it's not very well visually represented in terms of why he's always looking at his watch. And maybe I was just too dumb, or I wasn't paying attention before. So I never got the sense that, like, why aren't you looking for the bonds or the bombs? And it's like, well, he's checking his watch, and if the Geiger counter starts going off, then the bombs are nearby, kind of thing. So I'm picking up on more. I found Fiona to be more engaging. I do agree with the beginning stuff. You could have, laying out everything does slow it down a bit. And of course, the Bond forcing himself upon Hello Nurse was, wow, this just turned rather quickly. But I do give more credit to the Domino and Bond relationship. I really appreciate the depth of Fiona's character. Vargas, I had an appreciation for Vargas this time, and I was like, oh yeah, no, he's number two's henchman. And it's not even that they're buddies. It's just like, yeah, we just keep Vargas around because he doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't do goody two shoes, and he just liked killing. So I enjoyed it more. Let's see, if I were to rate it, I'm going to go with a 7.
7 martinis.
7 martinis.
Yeah, so in light of all my criticisms, in addition to that, given that how high the stakes are, you really don't feel the stakes that much at all in the movie. I also give it 7 martinis.
Okay,
cool.
Okay. I thought you did, and especially when they started, like, it was knowing the complexity of the plot, and also for the executive for counterintelligence, revenge, and extortion. They do all of them. They do all of them to get their plan finished. And so I absolutely think that Spectre lives up to their name. And yeah, the 7 chimes of Big Ben at 6 o'clock, I thought was genius. Steve, how many martinis are you going to give the ball that is Thunder?
Thunderball, I give 7.5. I think it's a little better than you guys are giving it credit for. Well, I mean, you guys gave it great credit. 7 is a great number. So 7.5. You guys we're starting to get a lot of pausing and freezing. So let's, if you don't mind, we'll jump over to the chat and go through those real quick, and we'll call it a night.
Sounds good. Sorry, there was a lot to cover tonight, Steve. I apologize for running long, man.
No, it's fine. It's totally fine.
And also, the reason I didn't wear the suit today, well, I wanted to wear casual Bond wear.
Oh, right.
He was wearing the aggressive salmon sort of shirt in Nassau. I couldn't find a full button up, but this is my Nassau gear. I love it when Connery's in the Bahamas.
Perfect.
And I won't have these connection issues next week. I will be having 1 gigabyte internet, and it will be lovely because I will have the modem and the router here and set up on the other side of the house. It'll be much better.
Awesome.
That's a visit from Q Branch.
Let's see where we at. Hellos, couple of hellos. Let's get.
Bunyan Snipe is here. Hey, man. It's amazing that Tom Jones has been around this long. Yes, Tom Jones, still alive.
Yep.
And Bunyan says, wasn't in the pre-credit scene in the same, the Bond wasn't in the pre-credit scene in the same way as the man with the golden gun. In this one,
okay.
No, Bond's in the pre-credit scene of Thunderball.
Man with the Golden Gun, From Russia with Love, Live and Let Die, and then this new one, and I think another one. Sorry, we froze up.
Are the ones
that he's not in?
Okay. But Bambi and Thumper are henches too. Bambi and Thumper are henches. I think I did. I put them in there. Hey, Tim Possible. Eva Green is sexy. My favorite. You're with Steve.
Me too.
Bunyan said Naomi is also a henchwoman. Naomi. Who was Naomi again? Anyway, Autotop, skirts, Bond girl, henchwoman. Yeah, we were just going with the women. We were just in I understand that Autotop could be considered a henchwoman, but soft spot in my heart for a murderous counter agent.
Some more hellos.
Hey, Gundle Winterbomb. Best Bond woman is Moneypenny. All class with great assets. That is true, and I'm surprised that I left her off the list, but she got an honorable mention right off the top. The Italian Stallion. Hi, I like your face. I'm assuming that's to all of us.
I hope
Thank
so.
you. Hey, and a Twitch user, so thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Bunyan says the Disco Volante, roller skate mandatory.
Yeah, I can't help but think of that one for the Disco Volante.
Bunyan says it's a shame we didn't get the Blofeld from the books, but his first look was far too close to the film version of Auric Goldfinger. Really? I don't even think I've encountered Blofeld in the books yet. I've read some, not all.
He weighs like 280 pounds. People were saying that it would have made more sense to have Dave Bautista play Blofeld in Spectre than Christoph Waltz, because he would have been closer to the book. And of course, we know he's got acting chops.
Mm-hmm. This is true. Bunyan says they got the second and third books of the Blofeld trilogy the wrong way around.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and and of course, Moonraker is like a compilation album. Moonraker, yeah, and I'm assuming you're talking about them, and I know you have a soft spot in your heart for the novel Moonraker, preferably made in modern day with the plot. Yep. Bunyan said best Fleming novel, perhaps the most messed up film. Yeah, in terms of Moonraker, yeah.
And last one.
And Bunyan says, ironically, they stole the jetpack scene from Thunderball to make From Russia with Love video game more fun. Well, and
cool.
Yeah, and it does. And also, bringing it full circle back to Sean Connery's birthday, if you have not played the From Russia with Love video game, it is the final performance of Sean Connery as James Bond. It's great. It's one of the better James Bond games. It's no GoldenEye, but it is good.
Cool.
All right.
All right, that'll do it. Do we want to tease next week's episode?
Well, next week, we are going to be doing You Only Live Twice, and it does showcase another Ming set. I really wanted to get into the best villains layers. I want to know the best bases. So I was thinking that's what we could do. What do you think, Kat?
Yeah. We should definitely get into that next week. That's actually pretty good.
Okay. Wicked cool. Then I suppose that Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns will return. Steve, did you have anything you wanted to say before we close out?
No, just be sure to catch the Phantasmagorium show. All the wires are in the way. Monday through Friday, every day, Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
Also on Monday nights, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, we have Set to Stun, which is our Star Trek show. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow at noon Pacific and 3 Eastern, Terje is back with Cult Classic Movie Corner, and his guest will be the director of the new doc, Howard the Doc, all about Howard the Duck. So it should be a fun show. So join us there if you can.
Perfect.
And I think with that we'll call it a night. So for Scotty R37 and Catherine, I am Steve Foley. Have a great night, everybody.
See you guys.